Iris Lennox stood at the entrance to Harrowfield's great hall, wearing a dress she had not chosen, summoned 3 months ago by a letter that spoke of back wages and her late mother's service. And now she understood. Standing before 40 guests, with candlelight catching on marble, she could feel through the thin soles of borrowed shoes that she had been brought here for something else entirely. Sir Neville Prescott's hand rested at her elbow, his grip firm enough to guide but light enough to appear courteous. And when he stepped forward to address the room, his voice carried the practiced warmth of a man who knew exactly how many people were watching. "My lords, ladies, we are honored to present a discovery of some delicacy," Neville said, and Iris felt the weight of 40 gazes settle on her like snow accumulating on a windowsill. The late Earl of Whitmore's other daughter. The murmurs began immediately. Iris did not lower her eyes. She had spent 5 years teaching music to the daughters of Thornbury's respectable families, and she knew what it meant to hold a room's attention without flinching. Her mother had taught her that, Catherine Lennox, who had died when Iris was 16 and had never once told her daughter who her father was, only that he had been a good man who could not stay. Iris had built a life from that silence. 12 pupils, a rented room above the chandler's shop, a reputation precise enough that the curate's wife sent her 3 daughters every Thursday afternoon. She had been summoned to Harrowfield under the pretense of a matter regarding her mother's employment, and she had come expecting a reference, or perhaps a small bequest, from the household funds. Instead, she had been dressed by a maid who would not meet her eyes, positioned at the entrance to a hall she had never seen, and introduced as the bastard daughter of a man whose name she had learned only yesterday. At the far end of the hall, a man she had never seen began to move. He was tall, dark-haired, perhaps 33, and he crossed 6 feet of marble, in complete silence. The guests parted without being asked. When he stopped before her, Iris saw that his eyes were gray, that he was looking at her as though he had been expecting her for a very long time. "Miss Iris Lennox," he said, her full name, spoken with the kind of authority that did not require volume. The laughter in the room died. Neville's hand dropped from her elbow. Iris stared at him. "How do you know who I am?" The man did not smile. "Your father was a good man," he said, and his voice was steady and deliberate. "This room should know that." Neville recovered quickly. "Your Grace is most generous," he said, stepping forward with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Miss Lennox has had a difficult journey. We were just about to. I would like to speak with Miss Lennox privately," the man said, and it was not a request. Neville's smile held. "Of course, the library is at your disposal." Iris followed the stranger out of the hall, her borrowed shoes clicking against the marble, and she did not look back at the 40 guests who were already beginning to whisper. The corridor was quieter. Colder? The man walked 3 paces ahead of her, and when they reached the library, he opened the door and waited for her to enter first. The library was enormous. 4 walls of books rose to a ceiling painted with clouds and angels, and a fire burned in the grate at the far end. Iris stopped in the center of the room and turned to face him. "Who are you?" she asked. "Lord Julian Cavendish," he said. "Duke of Harrowfield, your father's godson." Iris felt something tighten in her chest. "My father." "The Earl of Whitmore," Julian said. "He died 8 years ago." "I know when he died," Iris said. "I did not know who he was." Julian studied her for a moment. "He asked me on his deathbed to ensure you received what he intended." "What did he intend?" "More than what you have been given." Iris took a step toward him. "That is not an answer." Julian's expression remained unchanged. "No, it is not. Then why did you say my name in front of all those people? Julian's gaze held steady. Because Sir Neville brought you to that hall to establish a narrative before the truth could reach a courtroom. He introduced you as a charity case. The other daughter, rescued by his wife's generosity. If that is the first word spoken about you in society, any future claim you make will read as ingratitude. Iris's hands curled into fists at her sides. What claim? The one your father made in his will. He left me nothing, Iris said. I would have been told. You should have been, Julian said. You were not. Iris stared at him. Why not? Because the man who destroyed the document is the same man who brought you to this house tonight. The fire crackled in the quiet that followed. Iris felt the weight of the day settle over her like a cloak she could not remove. The letter 3 months ago. The journey to Harrowfield. The maid who addressed her without speaking, the great hall full of strangers. And now this man, who knew her name and would not tell her why. I do not understand, she said finally. Yeah, you will, Julian said. But not here. Not tonight. When? When I can prove what I am telling you is true. Iris shook her head. That is not good enough. Julian looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not sympathy exactly, but something closer to recognition. Your father loved your mother, he said quietly. He paid her cottage rent for 10 years after she left this house. He intended to provide for you. That intention was stolen. I am trying to return it. Iris felt her throat tighten. Why do you care? Because I promised him I would, Julian said. And I failed to keep that promise for 6 years. Before Iris could respond, the library door opened. Neville entered with a smile that did not waver. Your Grace, I hope Miss Lennox has not been too much trouble. Julian's tone was even. None at all. Neville turned to Iris. My dear, you must be exhausted. I have had a guest room prepared. You will stay the night, of course. Iris wanted to refuse. She wanted to demand answers from Julian, from Neville, from anyone who would tell her the truth. But she was 26 years old. She had traveled 3 hours by coach, and she was standing in a house that had belonged to a father she had never known, wearing a dress that did not belong to her. She nodded. Excellent, Neville said. Lady Cordelia will see you settled. A woman appeared in the doorway. Tall, fair-haired, perhaps 30. She looked at Iris with an expression Iris could not read, and then she smiled. This way, Miss Lennox. Iris followed her out of the library. Julian did not move. Neville remained by the door. And as Iris stepped into the corridor, she heard Neville's voice, low and pleasant. Your Grace is very kind to take an interest. Julian's reply was too quiet to hear. Cordelia led Iris up a staircase and down another corridor, and when they reached the guest room, she opened the door and stepped aside. I hope you will be comfortable, she said. Iris looked at her. You are Lady Cordelia Prescott. She nodded. Yes. The Earl of Whitmore's daughter. Cordelia's smile did not falter. Yes. Then you are my sister. Cordelia hesitated. Half-sister, she said finally. Yes. Iris waited for her to say something else, anything else. But Cordelia only inclined her head and withdrew, closing the door behind her. Iris stood in the center of the guest room and looked around. The bed was large, the curtains were heavy, and the fire had already been lit. She crossed to the window and looked out at the dark grounds below. Somewhere in this house, there were answers. Somewhere in this house, there was proof of who her father had been and what he had intended. Julian had said the document had been destroyed. He had said Neville had destroyed it. but he had also said he could prove what he was telling her was true. Iris turned away from the window and began to search. She started with the desk. Empty drawers, blank paper, a pen that had not been used. Then the wardrobe. Linens, a spare blanket, nothing else. She knelt beside the bed and checked beneath it, then stood and examined the mantelpiece. Nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed the door at the far end of the room. She crossed to it and turned the handle. It opened onto a small sitting room, and beyond that, another door. She opened it and found herself in a corridor she did not recognize. She followed it. The corridor ended at a staircase that led down. Iris descended carefully, her hand on the railing, and when she reached the bottom, she found herself in a part of the house she had not seen before. The walls were paneled in dark wood, and the air smelled faintly of beeswax and old paper. She walked slowly, listening for footsteps, and when she turned a corner, she saw a door standing ajar. Light spilled from the gap. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was a music room. A pianoforte stood against the far wall, its lid closed, and shelves lined with sheet music filled the space beside it. Iris crossed to the pianoforte and ran her fingers along the edge of the lid. The wood was smooth, well cared for. She lifted the lid and pressed a single key. The note rang out clear and true. "My father had it tuned every year," a voice said from the doorway. Iris turned. Cordelia stood in the entrance, her hands folded in front of her. "Even after your mother left," Cordelia continued, "he had it tuned every year until he died." Iris did not move. "Why?" "Because he loved her," Cordelia said simply, "and because he believed she would come back." "She did not." Cordelia's voice was soft. "No, she did not." Iris looked back at the pianoforte. "Did you know about me?" Cordelia hesitated. "Not when I was a child." "But later?" "Yes," Cordelia said quietly. "Later I knew." Iris turned to face her. "How long?" Cordelia met her gaze. "Since I was 19. Iris felt something cold settle in her chest. "That was 11 years ago." She nodded. "Yes." "And you said nothing?" Cordelia's expression did not change. "No." Iris crossed the room and stopped in front of her. "Why?" "Because my husband told me to forget it," Cordelia said. "And because it was easier than being ashamed of my father and of myself." Iris stared at her. "You knew I existed, and you said nothing." "Yes." "For 11 years." "Yes." Iris turned away. She could not look at this woman, this stranger who was her sister, and not feel the weight of all those years pressing down on her. 11 years. 11 years of silence while Iris had taught music in Thornbury, while she had built a life from nothing, while she had believed herself alone in the world. "I would like to be alone now," Iris said. Cordelia nodded. "Of course." She withdrew, and the door closed softly behind her. Iris stood in the music room for a long time. Then she crossed to the shelves and began to search. She found her mother's name in the third ledger she opened. Catherine Lennox, employed as music instructor, 1808 to 1818. 10 years. Iris traced the entry with her finger, and when she turned the page, a pressed flower fell out. She picked it up carefully. It was a violet, faded but still intact, and written on the slip of paper beneath it in careful script were the words, "For Catherine, who taught me to listen." Iris closed the ledger and held the flower in her palm. Her father had loved her mother. He had kept this flower. He had tuned the pianoforte every year, and he had died without ever telling Iris his name. She returned to the guest room as the clock struck midnight, and she did not sleep. Iris found Julian in the corridor outside the breakfast room the next morning. He was standing by the window, looking out at the grounds, and when she approached, he turned. "Miss Lennox," he said. "I want answers," Iris said. Julian glanced down the corridor, then gestured toward a door at the far end. "Not here." She followed him into a small study. He closed the door behind them and waited. "You said my father left me something in his will," Iris said. "What was it?" "A codicil," Julian said. "A legal addendum to the original will. It named you as his daughter and granted you the London house, the Whitmore Library, and £600 annually." Iris felt the floor shift beneath her. £600, he nodded. "Yes. That is more than I have earned in 5 years. "Yes," Julian said. "It is." Iris crossed to the desk and gripped the edge of it. "You said the document was destroyed." "It was. Sir Neville discovered it 2 years ago during renovations. He burned it." "Then how do you know what it said?" "Because my solicitor, Mr. Arden, made a copy during the original probate inventory 8 years ago. He filed it at the Chancery office." Iris turned to face him. "Why?" "Because he is thorough," Julian said, "and because he suspected Neville would try to suppress it." "Then why did it take 8 years for anyone to tell me?" Julian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. "Because I did not look for you." Iris stared at him. "What?" "Your father asked me on his deathbed to ensure you received what he intended," Julian said. "I assumed he meant the estate, the tenants. I did not think to search for a daughter I did not know existed. That was my failure." "For 8 years," Iris said. "For 6, Julian said. "Arden found the codicil copy 2 years ago. It took him 6 months to locate you. I have spent the last 18 months building the case." Iris shook her head. "Why now?" "Because Neville discovered that Arden had the copy. He brought you here to inoculate society against sympathy. If you are introduced as a charity case before the legal claim surfaces, the narrative is already set. When the petition reaches a courtroom, you will be seen as ungrateful, not wronged." Iris felt her hands begin to shake. "That is why he brought me to the hall." Julian confirmed it. "Yes." "And that is why you said my name." "Yes," Julian said. "I will not allow the first word spoken about you in that room to be a diminishment." Iris looked at him. "What happens now?" "Arden will file the Chancery petition within the week. You will become a legal claimant. Neville will oppose it. And if he wins, then you return to Thornbury with nothing. And if you win," Julian met her gaze, "then you receive what your father intended." Before Iris could respond, the door opened. Neville entered with a smile. "Your Grace, Miss Lennox. I hope I am not interrupting." Julian's tone was polite. "Not at all." Neville turned to Iris. "My dear, I thought you might enjoy a tour of the estate. Lady Cordelia has offered to accompany you." Iris wanted to refuse, but Julian's expression was carefully neutral, and she understood that this was not the time to argue. She nodded. "Excellent," Neville said. "Shall we?" He extended his arm. Iris did not take it. She walked past him into the corridor, and Cordelia was waiting by the stairs. They descended in silence, and when they reached the entrance hall, Cordelia led her outside. The grounds were vast. Iris followed Cordelia along a gravel path that wound through gardens and past a small pond. And when they reached the edge of the estate, Cordelia stopped. "This was my father's favorite place," she said. "He used to walk here every morning." Iris looked out at the fields beyond. Did he ever speak of my mother? Cordelia hesitated. Not to me. But you knew about her. She nodded. Yes. How? Cordelia turned to face her. I found the household ledgers when I was 19. My father paid your mother's cottage rent for 10 years. I asked my mother about it. She told me the truth. And you said nothing. Cordelia's voice was barely audible. No. Iris looked at her. Why are you telling me this now? Cordelia met her gaze. Because you deserve to know. I deserved to know 11 years ago. Yes, Cordelia said quietly. You did. They walked back to the house in silence. When they reached the entrance, Cordelia paused. My father was a good man, she said. But he was also a coward. He loved your mother, but he would not leave my mother. He provided for you, but he would not claim you. I am sorry for that. Iris did not respond. She went inside and climbed the stairs to the guest room, and when she closed the door behind her, she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry. That afternoon, she walked the estate alone. She found the stables, the orchard, the walled garden. She found the cottage where her mother must have lived, empty now, the windows dark. She stood outside it for a long time, and when she finally turned away, she understood that the connection to her father was no longer abstract. It was visceral. He had walked these paths. He had paid for this cottage. He had loved her mother enough to keep a pressed violet in a ledger for 10 years. And he had died without ever telling Iris his name. Julian filed the chancery petition without consulting Iris first. She learned of it 3 days later when Mr. Arden arrived at Harrowfield with a leather case and a request to speak with her privately. They met in the library. Arden was a thin man in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. And when he opened the case and withdrew a sheaf of papers, Iris saw her name written at the top in careful script. This is the codicil copy, Arden said, placing it on the table before her. It was filed at the Chancery office 8 years ago as part of the original probate inventory. Sir Neville destroyed the original 2 years ago, but the copy remains legally valid. Iris looked down at the document. Her father's signature was at the bottom, Henry Whitmore, Earl of Whitmore. And beside it, her name. Iris Catherine Lennox, born 14th March 1800, daughter of Catherine Lennox. He named me, Iris said quietly. Yes, Arden said. And he provided for you. The London house, the Whitmore library, and £600 annually. All of it was meant to be yours. Iris touched the edge of the paper. Why did you wait 8 years to tell me? Arden's expression did not change. Because I did not know you existed until 2 years ago. The codicil was filed as part of the probate inventory, but it was not read aloud during the proceedings. Sir Neville ensured that. When I discovered it, I began searching for you immediately. It took 6 months to locate you in Thornbury. And then I informed His Grace. He instructed me to build the case before approaching you. He did not want to raise your hopes until we were certain the claim could succeed. Iris looked at him. And now? Now the petition has been filed. You are a legal claimant. Sir Neville will be notified within the week. Iris felt a chill run through her. What will he do? Oppose it, Arden said. He will argue that the codicil is invalid, that you have no proof of paternity, that the claim is opportunistic. He will do everything in his power to ensure you receive nothing. And if he succeeds? Arden met her gaze. Then you return to Thornbury with nothing. Iris stood and crossed to the window. Outside, the ground stretched toward the horizon, and she could see the cottage where her mother had lived, small and dark against the fields. She had come to Harrowfield expecting a reference. She had been introduced as the other daughter before 40 guests, and now she was a legal claimant in a case that would become public. "I cannot return to Thornbury," she said. "Why not?" Arden asked. Iris turned to face him. "Because I have 12 pupils and 5 years of work I will not abandon without a fight." Arden nodded. "Then you will fight." She straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I will." But even as she said it, she knew it was not that simple. The petition would become public. The village would learn of it. And when they did, they would ask the same questions Neville would ask in a courtroom. Who was this woman? What proof did she have? What right did a music teacher have to an earl's library? Arden left an hour later, and Iris remained in the library. Julian found her there as the sun was setting. "Arden told you," he said. She nodded. "Yes." Julian crossed to the table and looked down at the codicil. "I should have consulted you before filing." "Yes," Iris said. "You should have. I thought it would be easier if the decision was already made." Iris looked at him. "Easier for whom?" Julian met her gaze. "For both of us." Iris shook her head. "You do not get to make decisions for me." His voice was quiet. "No, I do not." They stood in silence for a moment, and then Iris picked up the codicil and held it out to him. "Take it." Julian did not move. "It is yours." "I know," Iris said, "but I cannot look at it right now." Julian took the document and placed it back in the case. "What will you do?" "I will return to Thornbury," Iris said. "I will teach my pupils, and I will pretend that none of this has happened." "You cannot pretend forever." She met his eyes. "No, but I can pretend for now." She left Harrowfield the next morning. Cordelia did not come to say goodbye. Neville watched from the entrance as the coach pulled away, and Julian stood in the library window and did not move until the coach was out of sight. Neville's letter reached Lord Pemberton before Iris's coach reached Thornbury. It was brief, precise, and devastating. "A petition has been filed against the Whitmore estate by a woman claiming to be the late Earl's natural daughter. The claim is without merit and represents an attack on the legitimate inheritance of Lady Cordelia Prescott. I trust you will understand the necessity of defending established order against opportunistic claims of this nature." Pemberton withdrew his support for Julian's reform bill within 2 days. The coalition Julian had spent 18 months building collapsed within a week. The bill, designed to expand borough representation and limit rotten boroughs, died in committee. Julian received the news in his study at Harrowfield. He read Pemberton's letter twice, then placed it on the desk and sat motionless for a long time. Iris returned to Thornbury and attempted to resume teaching. The schoolroom above the chandler's shop was exactly as she had left it. 12 chairs arranged in 3 rows, the pianoforte against the far wall, the sheet music stacked neatly on the shelf. She arrived on Monday morning and waited for her pupils to arrive. Mrs. Hadley's daughters did not come. At 9:30, a maid delivered a note. Iris opened it and read, "We cannot have our girls taught by a woman of uncertain birth, however capable. I am sure you understand." Iris folded the note and placed it on the desk. She waited. At 10 o'clock, 2 more pupils arrived, the blacksmith's daughter and the apothecary's niece. They sat in the front row and did not meet her eyes. At 10:30, the blacksmith arrived to collect his daughter. He did not offer an explanation. By the end of the week, 4 more families had withdrawn their daughters. On Friday afternoon, Iris sat in the schoolroom among half-occupied chairs and understood that 5 years of respect had been erased by one evening's introduction. She had been respected as a music teacher because she was competent and because her origins were vague enough to be overlooked. the moment her origins became specific and scandalous. The respect evaporated. She closed the school the following Monday. The landlord accepted her notice without comment. She packed her belongings into 2 trunks, paid the chandler's wife for the remaining month's rent, and hired a coach to take her back to Harrowfield. She had nowhere else to go. The coach arrived at Harrowfield on a cold afternoon in late October. Neville was not there to greet her. Cordelia was. She stood in the entrance hall as Iris stepped inside, and when their eyes met, Cordelia said, "I am glad you came back." Iris did not respond. She followed the housekeeper upstairs to the same guest room she had occupied before. And when the door closed behind her, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. She had lost everything. The school, the pupils, the community. 5 years of work gone. That night, she did not go down to dinner. Cordelia sent a tray, but Iris did not touch it. She sat by the window and looked out at the dark grounds, and when she finally stood, it was past midnight. She found Julian in the estate office. He was sitting at the desk, reviewing a stack of documents by candlelight, and when she entered, he looked up. "Miss Lennox," he said. "They withdrew their daughters," Iris said. Julian set down his pen. "I know. Mrs. Hadley, the blacksmith, the apothecary. 4 more families by the end of the week." His voice was steady. "I know." Iris crossed to the desk and looked down at the documents. "What are you doing?" "Building the case." "For what?" "A courtroom full of people who will ask the same questions the village asked. Who is this woman? What proof does she have? What right does a music teacher have to an earl's library?" Julian stood. "You have every right." "I have a piece of paper," Iris said. "A copy of a document that was destroyed. That is not a right. That is a claim. Then we will prove the claim." Iris shook her head. "I do not want to fight anymore." Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed to the door and closed it. When he turned back, his expression was different, softer, but no less serious. "Sit down," he said. Iris sat. Julian returned to the desk and began pulling documents from the stack. "Household ledgers," he said, placing the first one in front of her. "Your mother's name appears in every entry from 1808 to 1818. Cottage rent, paid quarterly. Music instruction fees, paid monthly." He placed another document beside it. "Witness statements. 3 former servants who remember your mother. 2 who remember your father visiting the cottage." Another document. "The codicil copy, filed at Chancery. Legally valid." Another. "A letter from your father to his solicitor, written 6 months before his death. He references a daughter and instructs the solicitor to ensure she is provided for." Iris looked down at the documents. "This is not enough. It is more than most claims have. It is not enough to prove I am his daughter." Julian sat down across from her. "You're right. It is not. But it is enough to prove he believed you were. And that is what matters in a court of law." Iris met his gaze. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I promised him I would." "You promised him 8 years ago. You could walk away now." Julian shook his head. "No, I could not." "Why not?" "Because I failed him for 6 years," Julian said quietly. "And I will not fail him, or you, again." Iris looked at him, and for the first time since she had arrived at Harrowfield, she felt something other than anger or grief. She felt hope. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We build the case," Julian said. "Together." They began the next morning. Julian cleared the estate office and set up a second desk for Iris. Arden arrived with more documents: probate records, tax assessments, correspondence between Whitmore and his solicitor. Iris spent hours cross-referencing ledgers, matching dates, and preparing witness statements. The work was meticulous and exhausting. But it was also the first time since the presentation that Iris felt like she was doing something that mattered. Julian worked beside her. He did not speak unless she asked a question, and he did not leave the office until she did. On the third day, Iris looked up from the ledgers and found him watching her. "What?" she asked. "You're good at this," Julian said. Iris looked back down at the ledger. "I am good at organizing information. That is not the same as being good at law." "It is close enough." They worked in silence for another hour, and then Iris set down her pen. "Lord Pemberton withdrew his support for your reform bill." Julian did not look up. "Yes." "Because of the petition?" He nodded. "Yes." Iris leaned back in her chair. "You could have told me. You had enough to worry about." "I still do," Iris said, "but I would rather know." Julian set down his pen and met her gaze. Neville wrote to Pemberton the day after the petition was filed. He framed the case as an attack on legitimate inheritance. "Pemberton controls 3 votes I need for the reform bill. He withdrew his support within 2 days. And the bill?" His voice was flat, dead. Iris felt guilt twist in her stomach. "Because of me." "Because of Neville," Julian said. "Do not confuse the two. You sacrificed your political career for a promise you made to a dying man." He met her eyes. "Yes. That is a steep price." Julian looked at her. "It is the price I should have paid 8 years ago." Iris did not know what to say to that. She looked down at the ledger in front of her, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Thank you." Julian inclined his head. "You are welcome." One evening, after a particularly long session, Iris found herself unable to sit still. She left the office and walked out onto the terrace. The air was cold and the sky was clear, and she stood at the railing and looked out at the dark grounds. Julian found her there 10 minutes later. He did not say anything. He simply stood beside her, his shoulder pressing against hers. Iris leaned into the weight. She did not move. Neither did he. They stood like that for a long time, and when Iris finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I do not know if I can do this." Julian's voice was certain. "Yes, you can." "How do you know?" "Because you are still here." Iris looked at him. His face was in shadow, but she could see the line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. He was not looking at her. He was looking out at the grounds, and his expression was calm and steady. "I lost everything," Iris said. "No," Julian said. "You lost a school. You did not lose yourself." Iris felt her throat tighten. "The village thought I was respectable, competent, worth teaching their daughters. The moment they learned who my father was, all of that disappeared." "Then they were wrong." "They were not wrong," Iris said. "They were conditional, and I did not realize it until it was too late." Julian turned to face her. "You built that school over 5 years. You earned their respect. The fact that they withdrew it does not mean you did not deserve it. It means they were not worthy of you." Iris looked at him, and the tightness in her chest eased. She had spent 5 years believing that competence could replace belonging. She had been wrong. But standing here, on this terrace, with this man who had sacrificed his political career to honor a promise he had failed to keep for 6 years, she realized that belonging was not something you earned. It was something you found. She reached out and took his hand. Julian's fingers closed around hers, and they stood together in the cold night air, and neither of them let go. That night, Iris could not sleep. She went downstairs and found Julian still in the office, reviewing documents by candlelight. When she entered, he looked up. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." Julian set down his pen. "I wanted to finish reviewing the witness statements." Iris crossed to the desk and looked down at the documents. "How many do we have?" "6. 3 servants, 2 tenants, 1 solicitor." "Is it enough?" Julian hesitated. "I do not know." Iris pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Show me." Julian slid the entire file toward her. "These are yours, every page. I should have given them to you the first night." Iris looked down at the stack of papers. Her father's will was on top. She picked it up carefully and began to read. "I, Henry Whitmore, Earl of Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make this codicil to my last will and testament. I acknowledge my daughter, Iris Catherine Lennox, born 14th March 1800 to Catherine Lennox, and I grant to her the following: the London house at 12 Grosvenor Square, the Whitmore Library in its entirety, and an annual income of £600, to be drawn from the estate in perpetuity." Iris read the words twice. Then she set the document down and covered her face with her hands. Julian stood and crossed to her side. He did not touch her. He simply stood there, and when Iris finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "He wrote my name," she said. He nodded. "Yes." "He called me his daughter." "Yes." Iris shook her head. "And no one honored it?" Julian's voice was gentle. "No, they did not." Iris looked down at the will again. "My mother never told me his name. She thought it would break me. She underestimated you." Iris let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. She was trying to protect me. "I know," Julian said. "But you did not need protection. You needed the truth." Iris wiped her eyes and stood. She crossed to the window and looked out at the dark grounds. Julian remained by the desk. When she finally turned back, he was watching her. "Thank you," she said. Julian inclined his head. "You are welcome." Iris crossed back to the desk and placed her hand on the stack of documents. "What happens now?" "Now we prepare for the library meeting," Julian said. "Arden has requested a private hearing with the magistrate. If we can prove the codicil is valid, the magistrate will sign a recognition order that will force Neville to accept the terms. And if we cannot prove it?" Julian met her gaze. "Then we go to court." Iris nodded. She picked up the will and held it in both hands. "I will not let him take this from me." His voice was firm. "No, you will not." He reached across the table and opened his palm. Iris placed her hand in his and gripped it tightly. They stood like that for a long moment, and when Iris finally let go, she felt something shift inside her. She was not alone. She had never been alone. She had simply not known where to look. The next morning, Iris confronted Julian in the corridor outside the breakfast room. "You told me you failed to keep your promise for 6 years," she said. Julian stopped. "Yes." "Why 6 years? My father died 8 years ago." Julian's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. "Because Arden found the codicil copy 2 years ago. Before that, I did not know you existed." "But you knew my father had asked you to ensure I received what he intended." He nodded. "Yes." Iris stepped closer. "Then why did you not look for me immediately?" Julian looked at her for a long moment. "Because I assumed his wishes were about the estate and the tenants. I did not think to look for a daughter I did not know he had. That is not good enough. His voice was quiet. No, it is not. Iris shook her head. You could have searched the probate records. You could have asked his solicitor. You could have done 100 things to honor that promise, and you did not. You are right, Julian said. I did not. Why not? Julian met her gaze. Because I was careless. I assumed I understood what he meant, and I did not question that assumption. That is worse than refusal. It is indifference. Iris stared at him. You are telling me that I spent 6 years in poverty and ignorance because you did not care enough to ask the right questions. He held her gaze. Yes, that is exactly what I am telling you. Iris felt her hands begin to shake. How am I supposed to forgive that? You are not, Julian said. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you to let me make it right. Iris looked at him, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than calm authority. She saw guilt, real, visceral guilt, and she understood that he had been carrying it for 2 years. You cannot make it right, she said quietly. You can only do what you should have done 8 years ago. Julian's voice was steady. Yes, and that is what I am trying to do. Iris turned away. She walked down the corridor and did not look back. That afternoon, Cordelia found Iris in the music room. Iris was sitting at the pianoforte, her hands resting on the keys, and when Cordelia entered, she did not turn. May I sit? Cordelia asked. Iris did not respond. Cordelia crossed to the bench and sat down beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, and then Cordelia said, I have known since I was 19 that I had a sister. Iris's hands stilled on the keys. I found the household ledgers in my father's study, Cordelia continued. I saw the rent payments to Catherine Lennox. I asked my mother. She told me the truth. Iris turned to look at her. And you said nothing. Cordelia's voice was barely audible. No. For 11 years. She nodded. Yes. Iris shook her head. Why? Cordelia looked down at her hands. Because my husband told me to forget it. Because it was easier than being ashamed of my father and of myself. Because I was a coward. Iris stood and crossed to the window. You knew I existed, and you let me live in poverty. Yes. You knew I was your sister, and you let Neville bring me to a ballroom and introduce me as the other daughter. Yes. Iris turned to face her. Why are you telling me this now? Cordelia met her gaze. Because you deserve to know, and because I cannot carry this silence anymore. Iris stared at her. What do you want from me? Nothing, Cordelia said quietly. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am telling you what I know. Iris crossed back to the pianoforte and sat down beside her. What do you know? Cordelia reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound ledger. She placed it on the bench between them. This is my private household ledger. I have kept it since I married Neville. It contains 10 years of rent payments my father made to your mother. I have never shown it to anyone. Iris looked down at the ledger. Why are you showing it to me now? Because it is proof, Cordelia said. Proof that my father acknowledged you. Proof that he provided for you. Proof that you are his daughter. Iris picked up the ledger and opened it. The entries were written in Cordelia's hand, careful and precise. Cottage rent, Catherine Lennox, £20 per annum, paid quarterly. This is your ledger, Iris said. Not your father's. I copied the entries from his ledger after I found them, Cordelia said. I wanted to remember. I wanted to have proof that what my mother told me was true. Iris closed the ledger and held it in both hands. Why did you not give this to Julian 2 years ago? Cordelia looked away. Because I was afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what it would cost Neville. Afraid of what it would mean about who my father was. And now? Now I am more afraid of what it will mean about who I am if I do not. Iris looked at her, and for the first time since she had met her, she saw something other than composure. She saw shame, real, visceral shame. And she understood that Cordelia had been carrying it for 11 years. What will you do with this? Iris asked. Cordelia met her gaze. I will give it to the magistrate. Iris stared at her. Neville will never forgive you. Cordelia's voice was firm. No, he will not. Then why are you doing this? Cordelia looked down at her hands. Because I let him destroy the codicil. I let him bring you to that ballroom. I let him turn you into a spectacle. I cannot undo those things. But I can tell the truth. Iris held the ledger out to her. This is yours. Cordelia shook her head. No, it is yours. I kept it for 11 years. It belongs to you now. Iris took the ledger and placed it on the bench beside her. She looked at Cordelia, and the anger in her chest began to ease. This woman was her sister, her half-sister, and she had known for 11 years and said nothing. But she was saying something now. Thank you, Iris said quietly. Cordelia nodded. She stood and crossed to the door, and when she reached it, she paused. I do not expect you to forgive me. Iris's voice was soft. I know. Cordelia left. Iris sat at the pianoforte and held the ledger in her hands, and when she finally opened it again, she began to cry, not for the inheritance, not for the cottage or the rent payments or the proof, but for the father she had never known and the sister who had stayed silent for 11 years. Neville came to the estate office 3 days later. Iris was alone, reviewing the witness statements. When he entered, he did not knock. Miss Lennox, he said, closing the door behind him. Iris set down her pen. Sir Neville. Neville crossed to the desk and placed a sealed envelope in front of her. I have a proposal. Iris looked down at the envelope. What kind of proposal? A settlement, Neville said. £200 and passage to Bath. You withdraw the Chancery petition, and I ensure you are comfortably settled in a new town where no one knows your history. Iris picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a bank draft for £200 and a letter of introduction to a boarding house in Bath. £200, Iris said. He nodded. Yes. My father left me £600 annually. You are offering me £200 once. Neville smiled. Your father left you nothing. A codicil that no longer exists is not a legal document. Iris set down the envelope. Mr. Arden has a copy? A copy proves nothing without the original. Iris stood. You burned the original. I did no such thing, Neville said smoothly. And even if I had, you cannot prove it. Iris crossed to the window and looked out at the grounds. You brought me to a ballroom and called me the other daughter in front of 40 strangers. You staged that presentation to inoculate society against sympathy. And now you are offering me £200 and a letter of introduction to a boarding house in Bath. He smiled. Yes. Iris turned to face him. No. Neville's smile did not waver. I beg your pardon? I said no. Iris repeated. You do not get to offer me quiet. Neville's expression hardened. Miss Lennox, I am trying to be reasonable. You are trying to silence me, Iris said. There is a difference. Neville crossed to the desk and placed both hands on it. A courtroom will ask whether a music teacher deserves a dead earl's library. They will ask what proof you have. They will ask why you waited 8 years to make your claim. And they will conclude that you are an opportunist. Iris met his gaze. A courtroom will ask why you burned a legal document. They will ask why you brought me to Harrowfield under false pretenses. They will ask why you introduced me as a charity case before anyone knew my name. And they will conclude that you are a thief. Neville straightened. You are making a mistake. Her voice was steady. No, you made the mistake. I am simply refusing to pay for it. Neville picked up the envelope and placed it back in his pocket. Very well. But do not say I did not offer you a way out. He left. Iris remained by the window, her hands gripping the sill. And when Julian entered 10 minutes later, she was still standing there. Neville was here, Julian said. She nodded. Yes. What did he want? Iris turned to face him. He offered me a settlement, £200 and passage to Bath. Julian's expression darkened. What did you say? I told him no. Julian crossed to her. Good. Iris looked at him. He said a courtroom will ask whether a music teacher deserves a dead earl's library. Let them ask, Julian said. The answer is yes. Iris shook her head. You do not know that. His voice was certain. Yes, I do. Iris looked down at her hands. I am afraid. Julian reached out and took her hand. So am I. Iris looked up at him. Of what? Of failing you again, Julian said quietly. Of building this case and losing it. Of watching you walk into a courtroom and come out with nothing. Iris gripped his hand. Then we will not lose. Julian met her gaze. No, we will not. That evening, Cordelia retrieved her private household ledger from her dressing room. She had not told Neville about it. She had not told Julian. She had kept it hidden for 11 years, and now she held it in both hands and understood that she could not hide it anymore. She placed the ledger in a drawer and locked it. Then she went downstairs to dinner and did not say a word. The library meeting took place on a cold November morning. The magistrate, Sir Alden Howe, arrived at 10 o'clock with his clerk. Julian, Arden, Neville, Cordelia, and Iris gathered in the library as the fire was lit and the table was set. Howe was a man in his 60s with gray hair and a stern expression. He sat at the head of the table and gestured for the others to sit. This is a private hearing, Howe said. I have reviewed the Chancery petition and the documents submitted by Mr. Arden. Sir Neville, you have filed an opposition. I am here to determine whether the codicil in question is legally valid and whether Miss Lennox's claim has merit. Neville leaned forward. Your Honor, the codicil in question no longer exists. Mr. Arden has submitted a copy. But a copy is not a legal document. Without the original, there is no proof that the codicil was ever executed. Arden stood. Your Honor, the copy was filed at the Chancery Office 8 years ago as part of the original probate inventory. It was signed by the late Earl's solicitor and witnessed by 2 clerks. Under the Probate Act of 1815, a Chancery-filed copy is legally valid if the original has been lost or destroyed. Howe looked at Neville. Do you have evidence that the original was lost? Neville smiled. I have no knowledge of the original's whereabouts. That is not what I asked, Howe said. Neville's smile did not waver. I cannot provide evidence of something that does not exist. Howe turned to Arden. Do you have evidence that the original existed and was destroyed? Arden hesitated. Not direct evidence, Your Honor. But I have circumstantial evidence that Sir Neville discovered the codicil during renovations 2 years ago and chose not to disclose it. Hal looked at Neville. Is that true? Neville's voice was smooth. No, it is not. Iris stood. He is lying. Hal turned to her. Miss Lennox, please sit down. She held her ground. No. He brought me to this house under false pretenses. He introduced me as a charity case before 40 guests. He did it to inoculate society against sympathy before the legal claim could surface. He is lying, and I will not sit quietly while he does it. Hal's expression did not change. Miss Lennox, I understand your frustration, but this is a legal proceeding. You cannot make accusations without evidence. I have evidence, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Cordelia stood in the entrance, holding her private household ledger. She crossed to the table and placed it beside the codicil. I have known since I was 19 years old that I had a sister, Cordelia said. I found the rent payments my father made to Catherine Lennox in his household ledgers. I copied them into my private ledger because I wanted to remember. I wanted to have proof that what my mother told me was true. Neville stood. Cordelia, what are you doing? Cordelia did not look at him. She looked at Hal. My husband discovered the codicil 2 years ago during renovations. He told me about it. He asked me what I thought he should do. I told him to forget it. I told him it did not matter. And he destroyed it. The room went silent. Hal leaned forward. You are saying that Sir Neville destroyed the original codicil? Cordelia's voice was clear. Yes. Neville's face went white. Cordelia, you do not know what you are saying. She met his eyes. Yes, I do. She opened the ledger and turned to the first page. These are the rent payments my father made to Catherine Lennox from 1808 to 1818. 10 years. £20 per annum, paid quarterly. I copied these entries from my father's ledger when I was 19. I have kept this ledger for 11 years because I was afraid of what it would mean if I did not. Hal took the ledger and examined it. This is your handwriting. She nodded. Yes. And you are stating that these entries are accurate copies of your father's household ledger? Yes. Hal looked at Neville. Do you dispute this? Neville did not respond. Hal set down the ledger and looked at Cordelia. Lady Prescott, you are aware that you are testifying under oath? Yes. And you are stating that your husband destroyed the original codicil? Yes. Hal leaned back in his chair. Why did you not come forward sooner? Cordelia looked down at her hands. Because I was afraid of what it would cost me. Afraid of what it would mean about who my father was. Afraid of what it would mean about who I am. And now? Cordelia looked at Iris. Now I am more afraid of what it will mean if I do not. Hal was silent for a moment. Then he picked up his pen and signed the recognition order. The codicil is valid. Miss Iris Lennox is recognized as the natural daughter of Henry Whitmore, Earl of Whitmore, and is entitled to the provisions outlined in the codicil: the London house at 12 Grosvenor Square, the Whitmore Library in its entirety, and an annual income of £600, to be drawn from the estate in perpetuity. He set down the pen and looked at Neville. I'm sorry, Cordelia said quietly. Iris stood and crossed to her. Cordelia extended her hand. Iris looked down at it. You knew for 8 years, Iris said. Cordelia nodded. Yes. That is a long time to have a sister and say nothing. Her voice was barely audible. Yes, it is. Iris took her hand. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a beginning. Hal left with his clerk. Arden followed. Julian remained by the window, and when Iris turned to him, he was watching her. You did it, he said. Iris shook her head. We did it. Julian crossed to her and took her hand. No, you did it. I just helped. Iris looked down at their joined hands. Thank you. Julian lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. You are welcome. Cordelia stood and crossed to the door. When she reached it, she paused and looked back. The music room is yours now, if you want it. Iris nodded. I do. Cordelia left. Iris and Julian stood alone in the library. And when Iris finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I cannot believe it is over. Julian's voice was gentle. It is not over. It is just beginning. Iris looked up at him. What do you mean? Julian reached up and cupped her face in his hands. Say my name. Iris's breath caught. Julian. Again. Julian. He kissed her. Slowly, deliberately, his lips pressing against hers with the same calm authority he had used to say her name in the great hall 8 weeks ago. Iris's hands found his shoulders, then his face, and she held him there, holding his gaze even as his mouth moved against hers. When they finally pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you. Iris smiled. You could have done it sooner. Julian's voice was soft. No, I could not. You needed to win first. Iris looked at him. And now? Now, Julian said. You have won, and I am yours. Iris kissed him again, and this time she did not pull away. Spring came to Harrowfield slowly. The frost melted from the terrace, the gardens began to bloom, and Iris spent her mornings in the music room, tuning the pianoforte and arranging the sheet music her father had collected over 40 years. One morning, Cordelia appeared in the doorway. She did not knock. She simply stood there, waiting. Iris looked up. Yes? Cordelia crossed to the pianoforte and placed a hand on the lid. Will you teach me the piece Father loved? Iris looked at her for a long moment. Then she shifted on the bench and made room. Cordelia sat down beside her. Iris opened the sheet music and placed it on the stand. This is the one he asked your mother to play every evening. Cordelia looked down at the notes. I did not know that. Iris's voice was quiet. Neither did I, until I found it in the ledger. They played together. Cordelia's hands were uncertain at first, but Iris guided her through the passages, and by the end of the piece, they were playing in unison. When they finished, Cordelia looked at her. Thank you. Iris nodded. You are welcome. Cordelia stood and crossed to the door. When she reached it, she paused. My daughters would like to learn the pianoforte, if you are willing to teach them. Iris looked at her. I am. Cordelia smiled. Good. They will be here on Thursday. She left. Iris sat at the pianoforte and looked out at the gardens. And for the first time since she had arrived at Harrowfield, she felt like she belonged. Weeks later, Iris stood in the entrance hall of the London house at 12 Grosvenor Square. The house was larger than she had expected. 3 stories, 12 rooms, and a library that took up the entire second floor. Julian stood beside her, holding a stack of documents. The Chancery confirmation arrived this morning, he said, handing her the letter. The library is yours. Iris unfolded the letter and read. Miss Iris Lennox is hereby recognized as the lawful heir to the Whitmore Library, consisting of 4,000 volumes and the harpsichord formerly belonging to Catherine Lennox. 4,000 volumes, Iris said. Julian smiled. And the harpsichord your mother played. Iris touched the edge of the paper. My mother never told me his name. She thought it would break me. Julian looked at her. She underestimated you. Iris folded the paper and placed it in the desk, her desk. She looked around the room. The walls were lined with books, the windows overlooked the square, and the harpsichord stood in the corner, polished and waiting. "I have opened a new music school," Iris said. 6 pupils so far. 2 of them are Cordelia's children. Julian smiled. "How is that going?" "Better than I expected," Iris said. "Cordelia is learning too." He nodded. "Good." Iris crossed to the window and looked out at the street below. "I never thought I would have this." Julian came to stand beside her. "You earned it." Iris shook her head. "I did not earn it. My father left it to me. You fought for it. Cordelia testified for it. I just survived long enough to receive it." Julian turned her to face him. "You did more than survive. You fought. You refused Neville's settlement. You stood in that library and demanded the truth. That is not survival. That is courage." Iris looked up at him. "I was terrified." Julian's voice was steady. "I know, but you did it anyway." Iris reached up and placed her hands on his face. "Say my name again." Julian smiled. "Iris Lennox." She kissed him. His arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and she leaned into him, her hands sliding into his hair. When they finally pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "You are settling in?" Iris smiled. "I am settling. There is a difference." Julian laughed. "What is the difference?" "Settling in is temporary," Iris said. "Settling is permanent." Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "Then settle." Iris looked at him. "Is that a proposal?" "It is a suggestion," Julian said. "The proposal comes later." Iris laughed. "How much later?" "Not long," Julian said. "I've waited 8 years already. I am not a patient man." Iris leaned across the table and kissed him. "Good. Neither am I." They sat together at the morning table, the Chancery confirmation letter between them, and when Iris looked out at the square, she saw children playing in the park, carriages passing on the street, and the life she had built from nothing stretching out before her. She had lost everything once: the school, the village, the respect she had earned over 5 years. But she had gained something more: a father's name, a sister's testimony, a house with her name on the deed, and a man who had sacrificed his political career to honor a promise he should have kept 8 years ago. She reached across the table and took Julian's hand. He met her halfway, and for the first time in her life, Iris Lennox felt like she was home.